Every winter you pay someone to keep you warm. You do it without thinking. The gas bill arrives, you pay it. The electric bill arrives, you pay it. Then you walk into a drugstore, grab a $2 packet off a rack near the register, crack it open, and shove it into your glove. 8 hours later, you throw it in the trash. You've done this dozens of times, maybe hundreds, and not once did it occur to you that the entire transaction was built on a lie so ordinary, so deeply embedded in your purchasing habits, that questioning it would feel like questioning gravity. Here is what is actually inside that packet you just paid $2 for. Iron, charcoal, to the trace of moisture. That is the complete ingredient list. Not a single proprietary compound. Not a single patented molecule. The iron rusts. The salt accelerates the rusting. The charcoal spreads the heat so it doesn't scorch your skin. And yet, a $2 billion global industry exists for the sole purpose of packaging that reaction into a pouch and selling it back to you at a markup that would make a pharmaceutical executive blush. The manufacturing cost of one packet is a fraction of a penny. The retail price is $1 to $2. The annual volume is hundreds of millions of units, torn open, used once, and buried in landfills. You're not buying chemistry. Now rewind. The average American household hemorrhages over $900 a year on home heating. If you live in Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin, anywhere the frost settles in October and doesn't leave until April, that figure stretches past $2,600. That is not a luxury, that is a ransom. Coal does not negotiate. It does not offer payment plans. The gap is not intelligence. The gap is exposure. Someone, at some point, made sure you never connected the dots between the salt on your kitchen counter, the aluminum foil in your drawer, and the 8 to 12 hours of sustained heat those materials can produce when combined with one additional ingredient that costs less than $1 at any hardware store, the same heat, the same duration, the same chemistry. This did not happen by accident. In 1891, a New Jersey inventor named Jonathan Ellis filed the first American patent for a portable hand and foot warmer. The chemistry was documented. The mechanism was public. Then, in 1911, a man named Earl Richardson built the first electric heating pad in Ontario, California, branded it the El Warmo, and fired the starting pistol on an entirely new industrial model. For the first time in human history, warmth was being routed through a wire and metered through a bill. Before Richardson's invention, portable chemical heat was not exotic knowledge. It was practical, inherited wisdom. Japanese households in the Edo period used chemical warmers against the body for comfort and medicine. 15th century alchemists cataloged the exothermic properties of oxidizing metals as routine thermochemical observation. Soldiers carried iron-based heat sources into the field centuries before anyone thought to wrap one in plastic and sell it at a convenience store. The knowledge was everywhere. It belonged to everyone. And then quietly, systematically, over the span of a single century, it was removed from common circulation. That is the architecture of the lie you have been living inside. Not a conspiracy shouted from rooftops, a slow commercial burial, 100 years of product launches, advertising budgets, and retail shelf space designed to make you believe that warmth is something you purchase, not something you produce. What comes next is the exhumation. The precise mechanism, the exact ratios, the reason activated charcoal does two specific things that make this reaction safe and sustained rather than dangerous and brief. But before any of that matters, you need to sit with this single fact. The most expensive lie in your winter budget is not the price of gas or electricity. Let's do the math that no one in the heating industry wants you to sit down and actually calculate. Because once you see these numbers side by side, you cannot unsee them. You cannot go back to paying without feeling the weight of what's being extracted from you. The formula inside every branded heat pack on the market, every single one, Hot Hands, Grabber, Heat Factory, Thermopad, is identical. Iron powder, table salt, activated charcoal, vermiculite, water, 5 ingredients. 4 of them are already in your house or within walking distance of it. The 5th costs $7 for a bag that will outlast 3 winters. When you combine them in the correct ratio, you get a reaction that holds a steady 104 degrees Fahrenheit for up to 12 hours. That is not a rough estimate. That is the measured thermal output of the exact chemistry these corporations package, brand, and sell back to you at a 300 to 500% markup. One self-made packet costs less than 50 cents in raw materials. The store-bought equivalent runs you $1.50 to $2.50. Now multiply that difference across a single winter. If you use 2 packets a day for 5 months, which is conservative for anyone who works outdoors or commutes on foot, you are handing over somewhere between $450 and $750 a year for a chemical reaction that a first-year chemistry student can explain in under 90 seconds. Across a decade, that is $5,000 to $7,000 spent on rust, literal rust, because that is all this reaction produces. Iron atoms meet oxygen in the presence of a saltwater electrolyte. Electrons transfer, iron oxide forms, and energy exits the system as heat. The enthalpy of that reaction is negative 824 kilojoules per mole of iron oxide produced. Negative means energy leaves. Energy leaves. As warmth you can feel against your skin. The iron does not combust. It does not burn. It oxidizes at an accelerated rate, and the acceleration is controlled entirely by how much salt solution contacts the metal surface. Here is where the engineering becomes almost offensively simple. Under normal atmospheric conditions, iron rusts over weeks and months. The energy release is so gradual, you never register it. Salt changes the timeline. Sodium chloride in solution creates free-moving ions, an electrolyte bath that strips away the thin protective oxide layer forming on the iron's surface. Without that barrier, fresh metal is perpetually exposed. Oxygen keeps reacting. Electrons keep flowing. What would have been a month of imperceptible warmth collapses into 8 to 12 hours of concentrated usable heat. The charcoal increases surface area for oxygen absorption and holds moisture at the reaction zone without flooding it. The vermiculite regulates water content like a sponge, keeping conditions optimal without making the mixture soggy. That is the entire engineering. No proprietary technology, no patented catalyst, no rare earth additive, salt, iron carbon, a mineral you can buy at a garden center and water from your tap. Now, zoom out from the single packet and look at the industry. Hundreds of millions of these pouches sell globally every year, at an average retail price of $2 per unit, with a material cost well under 50 cents, including packaging. The margin on each packet approaches 70 to 80%. That margin exists for one reason and one reason only. You were never taught that the reaction is reproducible at home, not because the knowledge is dangerous, not because the chemistry is complex. The oxidation of iron is taught in every introductory chemistry course on the planet. It appears in the same chapter as rusting nails and corroding bridges, but no textbook, no teacher, no curriculum guide ever connects that chapter to the packet warming your hands on a January morning. The connection was not hidden by conspiracy. It was hidden by something far more effective: commercial irrelevance. Once the electric utility model restructured the American home around metered warmth in the 1920s through the 1950s, chemical self-heating became a product category rather than common knowledge. By the time iron salt hand warmers were mass commercialized in the 1970s, they arrived not as chemistry you could replicate, but as branded outdoor gear, shelved next to $80 jackets and $40 camp stoves. The packaging made the contents feel proprietary. The price made the contents feel engineered. Neither was true, so the proof sits in two columns. Column 1, the exposed chemistry, 5 commodity ingredients, a reaction any kitchen can host, a cost below 50 cents per 12-hour output. Column 2, the retail reality, identical chemistry, sealed in a pouch, marked up 3 to 5 times, sold by the hundreds of millions to people who were simply never told the recipe was public domain. The gap between those two columns is not innovation, it is not research cost, it is not safety engineering, it is the precise width of your ignorance, maintained across generations by the quiet absence of one paragraph in one textbook. Chapter you already passed years ago, and that gap has a price tag attached to it. One you have been paying every winter without ever once questioning what you were actually buying. The chemistry does not care who mixes it. It does not require a factory. It does not require a brand name on the wrapper. It requires iron, salt, carbon, vermiculite, and exposure to air. Everything else, the logo, the shelf placement, the marketing language implying complexity, exists to keep you purchasing what you could produce for a fraction of the cost. That is not opinion. That is arithmetic. And arithmetic does not negotiate. Here's the number that should make your stomach turn. $1.5 billion. That is the verified market valuation of the global hand warmer industry in 2024, projected to balloon past $2.5 billion by 2033. $500 million of that flows through North America alone every single year from disposable packets that contain iron, salt, and charcoal. 3 substances no one can patent. 3 substances no one owns. And yet, someone is collecting $500 million annually from people who do not realize they already have the recipe. Now slow down and look at where that money actually lands. Because this is not a story about chemistry anymore. This is a story about who holds the asset and who holds the receipt. The person buying a $2 packet at a gas station on a freezing Saturday morning is not paying for iron oxide. They are not paying for the sodium chloride, accelerating the reaction. They are not paying for the activated charcoal, moderating the heat curve into something safe and sustained. The raw material cost of what sits inside that sealed pouch is roughly 50 cents. That is a 300% markup, not on innovation, not on proprietary science, but on the simple fact that you were never handed the formula at the point of sale. Think about what that means in ownership terms. The company owns the packaging. The company owns the brand name printed on the outside. The company owns the shelf placement deal with the retailer. But the company does not own the chemistry. The chemistry belongs to the public domain It has belonged to the public domain since researchers documented the full thermochemical measurements of iron oxidation in the 19th century. Every study, every heat output calculation, every reaction kinetics paper generated during both world wars, when rust prevention was a military-scale engineering problem, sits in open academic archives right now. No paywall, no patent gate, no licensing fee. So here is the ownership split laid bare. You own the knowledge, or you could because it was published over a century ago. They own the convenience of you never looking it up. That is the entire asset, not a molecule, not a discovery. A gap in your awareness, maintained by a market structure that has zero financial incentive to close it. No retailer earns margin on information. No brand survives on a customer who never returns. No outdoor gear website funded by affiliate revenue from the same companies selling $30 multi-packs of heat is going to publish a sidebar explaining that a 12-year-old with a kitchen scale could replicate the product in 15 minutes. The suppression is not a locked vault. Picture the construction worker pulling a 10-hour February shift. He buys a 4-pack every Monday. That is $8 a week, $32 a month, roughly $130 across a single winter season, flowing out of his pocket and into a supply chain that adds nothing to the reaction he is paying for. And the iron does not care who mixed it. The salt does not perform differently because it came in a branded sachet. The charcoal does not moderate heat more evenly because a logo is printed above it. Every dollar past the raw material cost is a toll charged for his not knowing. Now multiply him by every hunter sitting in a blind at dawn, every concert goer in January stamping their feet in a stadium queue, every ski trip family stuffing pockets with packets bought at resort prices. Millions of transactions, exposed to a 300% premium, repeating every cold weekend of every winter, year after year, decade after decade. The revenue does not accumulate in the hands of the people generating the demand. It accumulates in the hands of the people who control the narrative around the product. This is the architecture that matters, not effort, not hours worked, not how cold you are or how early you wake up. The dividing line is simpler and uglier than any motivational framework will admit. On one side, entities that own the packaging, the shelf space, the brand story, and the algorithm placement. On the other side, everyone else paying a recurring fee for a chemical reaction that nature gives away for free, and that published science explained before anyone alive today was born. The formula was never hidden in a laboratory. It was hidden in plain sight in every first-year chemistry textbook, in the same chapter covering oxidation, reduction, and exothermic reactions. Exposed to every student, connected to a practical, free legal application by none of them. Because the bridge between academic knowledge and household action is the one piece of infrastructure no profitable industry will ever voluntarily build. And that bridge is exactly what changes the ownership equation, because the moment you understand that aluminum foil reflects over 95% of infrared radiation back inward, that a small air opening sustains the oxygen feed without collapsing the thermal envelope, that vermiculite moderates moisture and disperses heat so the reaction runs steady instead of spiking and dying, you stop being the recurring revenue line on someone else's quarterly earnings report. You become the person who holds the same asset the manufacturer holds, minus the logo, and logos do not generate heat. So now you know the math, you know the margin, you know what the logo actually costs versus what the chemistry actually costs. None of that matters if you keep buying the packet. Knowledge without a physical break in the routine is just entertainment. So here is the break. One action. Boring mechanical. Takes less time than brewing coffee, and it permanently severs the transaction between your wallet and a company selling you rust at a 900% markup. Walk into a hardware store, not online. Physically walk in because the point is to feel how ordinary this is, how unglamorous, how completely stripped of branding the raw material looks when it is not sealed inside a branded sleeve. Find the steel wool, medium grade, not the coarsest pad that feels like it could sand a deck, not the finest grade that dissolves between your fingers. Medium. A single box runs about $3. Inside that box is enough iron to produce 20 to 30 individual heat packs, each one capable of 8 to 12 hours of continuous warmth. Do the division yourself. That is roughly 10 to 15 cents per use. The commercial packet, sitting in the checkout aisle of the same store, costs $2 for the identical duration. Same outcome, different price by a factor of 13. Pull a portion of that steel wool out, about the size of a large egg when you hold it loosely in your fist. Now loosen the fibers. Tease them apart gently so air pockets form throughout the mass. You're not shredding it. You're giving oxygen a path to reach the interior, because without airflow, the oxidation reaction suffocates in minutes. This is the same engineering principle the factory uses when it packs the commercial version with vermiculite to create air channels. You are doing it with your fingers in 4 seconds. Next, the electrolyte. 1 teaspoon of table salt dissolved into 3 tablespoons of water. Stir it until the crystals vanish. That ratio is not arbitrary. Too little salt, and the reaction creeps along barely above ambient temperature. Too much, and it flares hot, burns through the available iron in 3 hours, and dies. 1 teaspoon to 3 tablespoons is the sustained moderate burn window. The same concentration the factory calibrates with automated mixing equipment, except yours comes from a kitchen spoon in a cereal bowl. Dip the steel wool into that solution. 20 seconds, lift it out, squeeze gently until it feels damp but not dripping. A soaking pack leaks salt water against your skin. A bone-dry pack loses the electrolyte bridge that keeps electrons moving between iron atoms and oxygen molecules. Damp, that is the target state. Now the accelerant, sold as aquarium filter media at any pet store, as activated carbon at garden centers, and capsule form at pharmacies. Grind a 1/4 teaspoon into fine powder and work it through the damp steel wool with your fingertips. Distribute it evenly. This is not optional. Without the charcoal acting as a catalyst surface, the reaction runs unevenly. Hot spots form and cool spots stall, and your effective heat window drops by nearly half. The charcoal is what turns a chemistry experiment into a reliable tool. Take a 12-inch square of standard kitchen aluminum foil. Place the prepared mass in the center. Fold the foil up around the sides and over the top, but leave a 1-inch gap at one end. That gap is the air inlet. Seal it completely, and the reaction consumes the trapped oxygen within minutes and stops dead. Leave it wide open and the iron oxidizes too fast, peaks early, and fades. 1 inch. Controlled airflow. Steady heat. Set it down. 5 minutes later, pick it up. It is warm. 10 minutes, noticeably warm. 20 minutes, full operating temperature, somewhere between 35 and 50 degrees Celsius, depending on your exact steel wool grade and how much air is reaching the core. Wrap it in a folded kitchen towel before it goes into a pocket or against skin. The cloth buffer does the same job as the smooth branded sleeve on the commercial version, except it cost you nothing, and you already own it. That pack will hold steady heat for 8 to 12 hours. The iron slowly converts to iron oxide, rust, and when it cools, the reaction is finished. Toss it in the trash the same way you would toss a rusty nail, chemically inert, environmentally meaningless. For a larger version, something you strap against your core during a winter hike or tuck into the back of a hunting jacket, scale the steel wool to a full fist, increase the foil to 18 inches square and leave 2 air gaps instead of 1. That version sustains warmth for 10 to 12 hours at roughly 40 degrees Celsius, and 40 degrees against your core is not comfort. That is where the line crosses from convenience into something your body actually registers at a physiological level. Here's what I am not going to tell you. I am not going to tell you this replaces your furnace. I am not going to tell you this eliminates your heating bill. I am not going to promise you some fantasy where 3 kitchen ingredients make winter free. That would be a lie, and lies are what got you locked into a 50-year purchasing cycle in the first place. Think about what actually changed in the last few minutes. Not your bank account, not your net worth. What changed is the distance between you and the exposed nerve in a $2 billion industry. You close that distance to 0. You now know that 65 cents worth of steel wool, table salt, and a strip of aluminum foil produces the same exothermic output as a product retailing between $3 and $5. You know the foil acts as a radiant barrier when the reflective side faces inward, recycling infrared energy back toward the reaction and toward your skin. You know that chemistry educators have measured the difference and confirmed it holds. None of that is theory. It is reproducible. It is legal. And the materials store indefinitely in a drawer. But here's the part that matters more than the savings. You now have a buffer, not a fortune, a buffer. The difference between a hunter spending $280 a season on disposable warmers and spending 35 cents for the same thermal output is not life-changing wealth. It is something quieter and more durable than wealth. It is slack. It is the room to absorb one unexpected expense without the whole month collapsing. It is the knowledge that if the power goes out, if the propane runs dry, if the paycheck lands 3 days late in January, you're not standing in the cold wondering who to call. You already know what to do. Your hands already know the motion. Tear the steel wool, dampen it, add the salt. Wrap it tight, shiny side in. Wait 90 seconds. Heat arrives, and it arrives. Because you understand why it arrives, not because a corporation decided to sell it to you today. That is the only promise worth making. Not that you will get rich, not that this single piece of knowledge transforms your financial life. The promise is smaller and more honest than that. The promise is that you can walk away from one more transaction that was never designed to serve you. You can opt out of one more recurring cost that existed only because the knowledge behind it was allowed to fade from public memory. Every time you exercise that option, the margin between you and financial fragility gets a little wider. Not dramatically, not overnight, but consistently, the way compound interest works, except in reverse. Instead of money growing in someone else's account, dependency shrinks in yours. One product you stop buying, one skill you recover, One season where the bill is lighter and the reason is something you did with your own hands on a Tuesday afternoon. If this disappears from your feed next week, that is not an accident. Content that compresses a company's profit margin into a 65-cent kitchen experiment does not get promoted. It does not get banned either. It simply drifts lower, one algorithmic adjustment at a time, until the people who needed it most never see it at all. The only mechanism that counters that drift is motion, people passing it forward. You do not owe me anything for this. You owe yourself the 30 seconds it takes to try it once. One pad of damp steel wool, a pinch of salt, a square of foil. Feel the heat build under your fingers. Let your body register what your mind already calculated,